Another jam-packed day. We're going to talk about some free agent news. We'll talk about international free agents and the class that the Tigers are bringing in, and what seems to be every day, more rumors. That and more all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, January 17th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to that final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, everybody. Hopefully, we will send you off into the weekend here with a fun show. Happy Friday to all. So, today we have a bunch of small stuff to talk about, similar to Wednesday's show. We're going to talk about more Bregman rumors, more Pete Alonso rumors. We're going to talk some prospect rankings within the Tigers organization that I think are interesting and kind of are the tip of an iceberg of a much bigger conversation surrounding the future of first base for this organization. We're going to talk about the international free agent class the Tigers brought in. We're going to talk about Tarik Skubal. We're going to talk about Marcus Stroman. We got a lot to go over. All right, so let's get right into it here so that we don't waste any more time blabbing about what we're going to talk about and actually just talk about it. Bregman, the update here is that like maybe the Cubs are interested now. That's like it. I am, look, I understand how this game is played. I understand that you got to do the dance. It's negotiations. You can't just be like, oh, well, forget it. Right? It's not my money. I understand that you can't just go all out overnight and you got to do the dance a little bit. When it comes to the reporting of the situation, I'm over it. Okay. I'm so over it. I am so over every 24 to 48 hours. There's like this new breaking news that everyone is supposed to just 100% believe. And then within 24 to 48 hours, again, that report is just no longer accurate at all. And that's just what this whole saga seems to be. So I'm willing to wait and be patient and see how it plays out. But I am very close to just being completely done with like Bregman related headlines. I'm so over it. So we'll see what happens. But now, yeah, the latest report is that like it's still the Red Sox and the Tigers showing the most interest. But now there's like a thing about the Blue Jays, maybe who aren't the Blue Jays? Who have the Blue Jays in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years? What big name free agent have the Blue Jays not been in on? Okay. And so great. Okay. They're in another one that's awesome. They're like the Knicks or the Lakers or the Cowboys. Like it's just, yeah, like, of course there's the Blue Jays. They're in on so-and-so. And like, that's sounds like I'm slandering the Blue Jays. I'm not, I promise. Just actually went to Rogers this summer with my dad for Father's Day. Fantastic trip, fantastic city, fantastic ballpark. Saw a pretty good game as well. I have no ill will toward the Toronto Blue Jays. This is just, again, on a kind of like an umbrella thought here. Like it's just all encompassing. I'm just tired of all of these reports meaning nothing. None of them mean anything to me anymore. I am numb to media updates on big name free agents. Completely numb to them. The Cubs and this report specifically was the Cubs are willing to pay more than everybody else. How on earth do you know that? Until he is a Cub and we hear, yeah, well, the Cubs just offered $50 million more than everybody else. There's no way you possibly know that information. That is either just like wild speculation or it's Scott Boras being like, hey, really quickly before we put pen to paper with so-and-so, why don't you just go say some random third team is willing to up the price to see if we can get these people to up the price. Anyway. So there's your update. The Tigers consistently have been a team that the national media says is interested, and I have no reason to believe otherwise. I think they are still interested. My theory here, okay, and I am just an idiot with a microphone, okay. I am not intelligent. I don't know anything, okay. I know nothing. So grain of salt. Putting that, this does not come from a source. This is not like some insider info I'm giving you. This is my opinion. Okay. Now that that's clear, my thought on this whole thing is that the Tigers have their set dollar amount for Bregman. And they're saying this is the highest we are willing to go. And Scott Boras / Alex Bregman are then going, okay, well, the Tigers are always going to be here with this amount of money, no matter what. We could wait until March, and they're going to be waiting here with this amount of money. So why don't we kind of play the game and do the dance with some other teams here, see if we can get them to go over that price significantly, and we can just take our time with this. And then if those teams do eclipse, especially if they comfortably eclipse the Tigers' dollar sign that they have, hard set for themselves, then Bregman will go to one of those teams. And if not, then we get a lot more serious about let's cross our T's and dot our I's here to get this done in Detroit. Again, I don't know any of that to be true. I could be totally off base. That's the vibe and impression I get currently, seeing the Tigers as an interest in every report, but none of them are like confident. They're all like, oh, like we don't know how much the Tigers are actually going to spend though. We'll see. Moving on to international free agency. That was, it opened on Wednesday. So weirdly enough, I'm recording this around 6 p.m. Got a long night of work with the Detroit News this evening. So recording this a little bit earlier. So if Sasaki signs later on Thursday evening, then there you go. That's why I'm talking about it as if he hasn't. In my world, he still has not signed. And I mentioned on Wednesday's show that I really thought he was going to be a Dodger because they are dropping international free agent commits that they have in order to get more money. And they're apparently now reportedly trying to make trades to bring in more international free agent money. Apparently the Padres are doing that too. So it looks like it's one of those two. You're going to find this hilarious. The third team, the Toronto Blue Jays. Anyway, but it looks like it's going to be the Padres or the Dodgers. I still just kind of default to it being the Dodgers. But we'll see what happens there. We talked about that a lot on Wednesday. We don't have to spend too much more time on it. The Tigers did, in fact, land Cris Rodriguez. We've known that for, I'm not kidding, over a year now. Like, he has been committed to play for the Tigers for over $3 million since he was 15, and he's 16 now. So that is awesome, though, to put pen to paper. I think that's a really big deal for the organization. Let's talk about Rodriguez a little bit. We talked about him briefly on Wednesday, but now that he's officially a part of the Tigers organization, we'll talk about kind of his play style and what we can expect out of him going forward. Then we'll put a bow on IFA, International Free Agency, and talk about the rest of the prospects the Tigers signed as well. We will do all of that and more right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is that subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services more times than I would like to admit that I wasn't using anymore. And I've already saved a ton of money getting off on 2025, new year, new me, trying to get my finances right. And Rocket Money has helped me a lot with that. They also have a goals feature that I've been able to use to automatically set aside money for my future. There's no more stressing about budgeting every month. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday recapping any happenings that occur over the weekend all throughout baseball, but especially, obviously, in Tigers land. And then we're very close to, once we start getting to the end of January, early February, we'll start our player preview series. And then spring training, baby, just right around the corner. So talking about international free agency, the period that opened on Wednesday, the Tigers headliner is Cris Rodriguez, $3.1 million. They signed him for, he's 16 years old, turned 17 at the end of January. He is the number 4 ranked prospect in the international free agent class. That means before Sasaki declared that he was coming stateside, he was the number 3 prospect because Sasaki is very obviously the number 1 player in this class. So what do we know about him? Big center fielder for the time being. And we'll kind of talk about that here in a second. But this dude is like 6'4", 200 pounds at 16 years old. Just an absolute unit. I retweeted one of his videos of his just like BP he was taking the other day. I think it was on Wednesday. I retweeted it, which makes sense. His swing is beautiful, and it's not the most like 100% mechanically sound yet, but he's 16, and it is already very, very beautiful. Kind of has a pre-stance load similar to Judge. That does not mean that I'm comparing him to Aaron Judge before I have to hear about how that's what I'm doing. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying optically, that's what one part of his preload looks like. Okay. Like that's all. But the swing is where it differs, and it gets, he's got a nice long bat path, really quick bat speed, which is something that scouts continuously have raved about. He looks really good. And he right now is a plus runner, which at that size is nuts and really, really cool. So we will see how that projects. I think right now, when you talk to people within the Tigers organization, there's kind of I don't want to say a consensus, because I'm sure at the beginning he will get put in center field to see if he can possibly stick there, just because that's where he's going to be the most valuable if he can. But I do think that the Tigers organization is kind of, I don't even know if I want to say planning on, but maybe somewhat assuming that he's going to move to corner outfield at some point in his career. He's just so big already, right? And as he continues to develop and just continues to grow as like a human being, a growing young man at 16 years old, he will, I'm sure, fill out his frame a little bit more, and there is a real chance that he ends up in a corner outfield position. Now, if the athleticism stays, that's fine, and that's great, and nobody's going to care. He's a righty with legit power. There are a couple of reports that say that he has the best power in like pure raw power ability in the entire international free agent class. There's been some comps I know on MLB Pipeline and Baseball America to like what Eloy Jimenez was thought to be when he came over and was an international free agent back. Oh geez, probably 10 years ago. Man, that's crazy how time flies. I remember when that class was introduced and how big of a deal Eloy Jimenez was. So and Eloy was fantastic. There's a lot of hype around him. Maybe that's not a 1-for-1, but and hopefully he's a better defender. No disrespect, but hopefully he's more athletic and a much better defender and better runner than Eloy Jimenez has ever been in his entire life. But if you can get that legitimate, 30 plus home run power over the course of a full season, and he's an athletic, right or left fielder with a good arm, you take that 10 times out of 10. The Tigers front office says they want him to be a middle of the lineup bat that can play a premier outfield position. So that is what we are hoping for there. But again, we have a couple years until he's even playing like the lowest level of minor league baseball. Like this dude's going to stay in the complex for a little bit, continue to develop. And then, maybe once he's 18 and like legally an adult, maybe then we can start talking about what he projects as long-term for the Tigers organization. The Tigers signed a lot of players, as all teams do. The Tigers also had tied for the most international free agent money at their disposal this year. So they were able to, even though they were paying over $3 million to Cris Rodriguez, they were able to sign still a hefty amount of players, which is always great. You want to get as many of these young players as possible because they're very hard to project. That's why you want a lot of them, because, some guy that nobody's ever heard of, that's not even on anybody's ranking, could be a major league caliber baseball player. He just literally hasn't grown into his body yet. So the other two, we're only going to focus on two other main kind of signees here. Jose Ramirez from Venezuela, obviously not Cleveland's Jose Ramirez, if that, this guy is 15 years younger. But this one's really interesting to me because this really highlights how young these kids are. Ramirez is a center fielder / catcher. You want to know how many times that's ever happened? Like never. Okay. I caught my whole life. If you put me in center field, I would have probably not stopped playing baseball at like 13 because I wouldn't have made teams. Like that is a wild combo. But when you're that young and athletic, they kind of just put you at position of need. And catcher, if you can have an athletic catcher behind the plate, or if you're fast enough to play center field, then you're going to do both of those things. The Tigers want him to play strictly center field. So we will see how that pans over, but really strong arm is something that a lot of people have said. And I think the big thing that everyone's hanging their hat on here is athleticism. If you have the athletic ability to play both of those two positions, you're a pretty gifted athlete. So we'll see what happens. As far as the offense goes, they're so young. We'll see. You know what I mean? If he has good discipline now, like who knows, right? Or high strikeout rate or low strikeout rate or whatever. Let's we're talking about 15, 16-year-olds. So we'll see how he develops. The other one is another Venezuelan, Carlos Benavides. Now, interestingly enough, Benavides sounds like the Tigers want him to stick at catcher and play catcher. So that's good. Has a really good arm right now. Really good. I mean, from the tape that I've seen, good kind of footwork and defensive play around the dish. But again, we'll see what happens. We'll see how the bat develops. We'll see a lot of time until these guys come over. Those two guys, the reason I bring them up is because they are on some sets of rankings. So and I'm talking like in the 40s and 50s and 60s in rankings. No one is even close to Cris Rodriguez. He's obviously kind of the quote unquote prize possession of this class for Detroit. But these are the only two guys that were even in any other like top 100, top 150 set of rankings. All the other guys were unranked, which is fine. Again, I cannot tell you the amount of really good baseball players that were unranked when they were international free agents. They're children. So we'll see what happens here. But I think something else I mentioned on Wednesday is that the Tigers are just very big on getting Venezuelan players in this class. And I think that's really cool. And I think that's also something they can use Miguel Cabrera for, right? He's technically a part of the front office. I think that's kind of a perfect opportunity to kind of make their presence known in Venezuela. That is something that is only available to the Tigers. Like that is a pitch and a player and a part of the organization that only we can offer. So I think that's hopefully a sign of things to come. If the Tigers can be kind of like the dominant pipeline team in Venezuela, that would be awesome. So we'll see what happens with that going forward. They did get a pitcher as well. Well, they got a few pitchers when it was all said and done, but another decently, higher regarded, not in the top 100, but Anderson Diaz is another guy. I mean, we'll see what happens. He's a lefty, which is cool, but who knows what his peak velocity is going to be like? Who knows what he's going to turn into down the road? So I think we'll see this class be pretty decently regarded. They'll come out with their rankings, international free agent rankings, which you also take with a huge grain of salt because who really knows? But the big thing here is that they made their presence known in Venezuela, and they got one of the best players in the class, and those are both two things that I am sure everybody should be very, very pleased about, and I'm sure is going to bring a lot of excitement to the organization. Let's keep the ball rolling. Got a few more kind of news and notes, rumors, you name it, to talk about. We'll do that right after this. Got to talk till today about our friends over at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps the game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite teams or just looking to add some extra excitement in the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always. So kind of rapid fire here in segment 3. I have a lot of smaller news and notes to go over that aren't a whole segment worth of talking or a whole show worth of talking, but I do think is worth bringing up in some capacity. One, Pete Alonso doesn't sound like he's going back to the Mets. Now, as I have continuously complained about over the last few weeks, reports can change on a dime, and the Mets can go back and just offer him more money, and they can resolve this. But the most recent report in my world here, Thursday evening, is that Alonso wanted a 3-year deal with a high AAV and opt-outs, and the Mets did not fulfill that. They countered with a different offer, and he rejected it. So we will see. We will see. The immediate question I get from a bunch of people the second that any big name free agent declines, when Bregman, and it was announced that he wasn't going back to Houston, now Alonso with the Mets, is like, are the Tigers in? I would find it really hard to believe that the Tigers are in on Pete Alonso. One, they already announced Colt Keith is going to play first base. Now, if you get Alonso, you figure it out. Okay. Like that's a big enough player and a premier enough player where if they were to do that, they would figure out a different solution for Keith. Maybe he would be the third baseman. They would figure out a way around it, I'm sure. But you bring in Gleyber Torres, you move Colt Keith to first base. You do have Spencer Torkelson still. The Tigers weirdly have a decent amount of depth, even if it's not super high-end depth at the moment, at the position of first base. So I have a hard time believing that they're going to put hundreds of millions of dollars on the table for a strictly first baseman. I think that their eyes are much more focused on Bregman or Santander or somebody that fits that bill of corner outfield / third base. Okay. So we'll see, but I would be stunned. I again, get asked that all the time with big name free agents whenever they hit the open market. Alonso's obviously been there for a while. We've talked about him a few times, but I cannot fathom the Tigers being legit players on Pete Alonso. Another kind of weird, out of nowhere, I'm not going to call it a rumor because it's not like, oh, we heard that there might be interest. It was just a Yankees website was throwing out mock trades, and one of them was Stroman to Detroit. And now that kind of got everybody talking. I don't see that either. The reason why is because, honestly, like I really appreciate Marcus Stroman's pitching, and I really appreciate the type of pitcher that he is. I like watching him pitch. But when it comes to what the Tigers need, they would have to give up assets to bring him in. Now, it might not be super expensive. You could probably bring him in if you agree to take the rest of the contract, which doesn't have much left on it. then you're probably talking about, staying away from the top end prospects in your organization. But you're talking about a pitcher that's now in his mid 30s. That's a ground ball pitcher. Still has some money next to his name, and would be your 2 or 3 starter for a year, maybe 2. Right? I don't know. I don't think the Tigers are really in the business of a profile that matches that, but we've been surprised before. We'll see kind of what how that works out, because the Yankees fans are convinced that Stroman is going to get traded here before spring training and before the season starts. So we'll keep an eye on that now that market is presumably going to heat up a little bit. But I really don't see the Tigers as a decent fit there. I think that the Yankees would want more than what the Tigers would be willing to give up, given what Stroman's role would be on the Detroit Tigers. Okay. Hopefully that was able to be followed. Josue Briseño, ranked as the number 6 first base prospect in Major League Baseball, according to MLB Pipeline, which then kind of reopens the can of worms that I talked about earlier, right? With Pete Alonso in first base. What does the future of first base even look like in this city? You have Colt Keith over there now. You still have your former 1-1 pick that can only play first base, only, or DH, I guess, but like Torkelson is only a first baseman. He's not playing anywhere else. Colt Keith's playing there in 2025, and now you have one of the best first base prospects in baseball that you definitely want to give an opportunity. This dude rakes. He was the first Arizona Fall League Triple Crown winner ever. So like Briseño's not going to be in the equation at the major league level in 2025. So you have time. This is not something that you have to know exactly how it's going to play out right now. You have time to iron it out. If Torkelson just never is able to find it at the plate, then he eliminates himself from that conversation going forward. If Colt Keith isn't good defensively at first base, then he eliminates himself from that conversation going forward. And when Glaber's deal is done, because it's only a 1-year deal, he goes back to second, right? Like it's not a terribly difficult fix if Briseño ends up reaching his ceiling. But it is, there are a lot of different possibilities, and there's a lot of different names there. And I think a lot of people in this fan base, rightfully so, are super excited about him. And I am too. AJ Hinch said last spring training, before he was really on a lot of people's radar, that he had a man crush on him because he just hits line drives every single time he steps in the batter's box. It's just all hard hit line drives all over the field. Removed from catcher, kind of had an injury thing this past year, but when healthy has done nothing but rake his entire professional career, really. So we'll see what happens there. And if he does end up continuing to hit well, which there's no reason to believe he won't, you're talking about a guy that could throw his hat in the ring for first base going forward as well. Just not in 2025. Not going to be a player for first base this season. Will be fun to watch, though, in the minors. Last thing I want to talk about here. Tarik Skubal, we talked about on Wednesday's show that MLB Network had a fan voting where they had, fans vote for the top 10 pitchers in baseball. Tarik Skubal was number 1. Good job, fans. MLB Network's table of analysts did not have him at number 1. They had Zach Wheeler at number 1 and Tarik Skubal at number 2. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Nice little end of the episode thing. I think it's ridiculous. I think, even if I would have rather they put Paul Skeens there. Genuinely. Like, that's a dude that throws 103. His off speed, can touch 100 and is a generational pitching prospect. And at least then you can argue with me, well, he can project better, right? Like, in my imagination, thinking ahead, this dude could end up being better than Skubal. Yeah, Paul Skeens could end up being the best pitcher on the planet. Some people think he already is in that conversation. He probably is. He's insane, right? So there's an argument for if he does even better, if he does the natural progression that prospects go through from year 1 to year 2, he could be the best pitcher in baseball. Fine, right? I can't argue with an imaginary universe that doesn't exist yet. Zach Wheeler is not going to magically take a big step forward at this point in his career. He's a great pitcher. I think he's a top 5 pitcher in the sport. I really wanted the Tigers to go after him more aggressively when he was on the market a few years ago. Okay? No ill will towards Zach Wheeler. Just think it's ridiculous that he's ranked ahead of Tarik Skubal in best pitchers on the planet. That's all. We'll end the show by saying rest in peace to the great and legendary Bob Uecker. An absolutely heartbreaking and devastating loss for the baseball community. Obviously was a Brewer through and through. Not Tiger specific here, but as a baseball fan and as, we are all members of the baseball community, right? The baseball fan community, and everybody's heart aches at the loss of Bob Uecker. Absolute legend. Was in baseball movies, was the voice of the Brewers for ages. Now he's gone at, in his 90s. And it's just, that is a piece of baseball. I think someone put out there that he has broadcasted over 2% of all baseball games in the history of the sport. That's unbelievable. He is an absolute legend. He will be missed greatly. One of the great personalities that this sport has ever offered us. And it has been an absolute pleasure listening to you, Bob. Rest in peace. Baseball will truly never be the same. Rest in peace, Bob Uecker. We'll see y'all on Monday. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all then. Go Tigers.